And as Commander-in-Chief, I have determined that it is in our vital national interest to send an additional 30,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan. After 18 months, our troops will begin to come home.
That was last December when President Obama announced at the West Point Military Academy that he would send 30,000 more Americans to Afghanistan. And after 18 months, our troops will begin to come home. That was then. This is now.
There has been a lot of obsession around this whole issue of when do we leave?
There has been a lot of obsession. That is not the word choice we associate with a commander-in-chief who still considers his own withdrawal date to be a sure thing, or a probably thing, or even a maybe thing. This weekend, the whole July 2011 withdrawal deadline seems to have gone walksies.
If Petraeus comes to the president in the spring of 2011 and says, you know, this July deadline, I need 6 more months, should that?
I would say give it to him, absolutely. And I think he has flexibility, realistically.
You think that he has flexibility on that? Speak for yourself, Senator Feinstein. Your home state colleague, the Speaker of the House, begs to differ. In an exclusive interview with the Huffington Post's Sam Stein, Speaker Nancy Pelosi was asked if troops would be withdrawn from Afghanistan in July 2011. She replied, quote, I do, and everything I saw there before, for all the bad things there that I saw in terms of corruption and money wasted, I did consistently hear that the timetable was on schedule to have serious drawdown. Sam Stein described Nancy Pelosi as quite firm on the subject, saying the Speaker emphasized that the House may use the power of the purse to ensure the drawdown. In other words, Speaker Pelosi warning that the Democratic majority in the House will not just argue against blowing through the deadline, they will act to force compliance with the deadline, using money. Already today, Congresswoman Nita Lowey of New York moved to strip $3.9 billion in aid money for Afghanistan out of the foreign aid bill, citing rampant Afghan corruption. Quote, I do not intend to appropriate one more dime for assistance to Afghanistan until I have confidence that U.S. taxpayer money is not being abused to line the pockets of corrupt Afghan government officials, drug lords, and terrorists. Don't know why she thinks that might be happening. Maybe it's because of the pallets full of cash that are being airlifted out of Kabul every day. Today, the Wall Street Journal followed up on reporting done by the Washington Post in February that millions of dollars a day, somewhere on the order of $1 billion a year, has been flown in cash out of Kabul airport every year for the last 3 years. And that's the above-board take. Quote, the cash packed into suitcases, piled onto pallets, and loaded into airplanes is declared and legal to move. But U.S. and Afghan officials say they are targeting the flows in major anti-corruption and drug trafficking investigations because of their size relative to Afghanistan's small economy and the murkiness of their origins. Officials believe some of the cash, if not most, is siphoned from Western aid projects and U.S., European, and NATO contracts. $3 billion is an amount of money that the human brain simply cannot comprehend. Making it all the more incomprehensible, though, is how much money $3 billion is in a country like Afghanistan. Quote, the amount declared as it leaves the airport is vast in a nation where the gross domestic product last year totaled $13.5 billion. More declared cash flies out of Kabul each year than the Afghan government collects in tax and customs revenue nationwide. More cash, and this is the legal stuff, flies out of Afghanistan in suitcases and stacked on pallets than gets collected in taxes in the entire country in a year. Is that a problem our 100,000 troops are supposed to solve? And if so, how should they do that? Joining us now is reporter Michael Hastings, who wrote the explosive profile of General Stanley McChrystal in this month's Rolling Stone magazine. This is his first interview since returning from Afghanistan. Michael, nice to see you. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
General McChrystal moved to retire altogether from the United States Army today. Have you had a chance yet to think big picture about the impact of your reporting here on him, on you, on the war, or do you feel like you're still in the middle of it?
I haven't had too much time to reflect on the impact of the story, though I think it's a positive sign that people are focused on Afghanistan, talking about the strategy, talking about some of the flaws in the strategy. I mean, the corruption story that Matt Rosenberg did today, he's one of the many great reporters working in Kabul. He's with the Wall Street Journal, and I think it's excellent that it's getting this much attention.
Now, your piece was a little bit about the type of language that General McChrystal and his aides used to describe other people involved in the aid effort. Obviously, that's what led to the most explosive conclusions from or implications of your piece. But the overall point was about counterinsurgency being a recipe for endless war. Do you feel like that point has been picked up on, or do you think it's been lost in the shuffle?
I don't know. I think people are talking about counterinsurgency in a way that I hadn't heard them talk about it before. Yeah. I think, obviously with the rules of engagement, which are the restrictions put on U.S. forces, General Petraeus is now reviewing those. So many aspects of the piece are getting appropriate attention. But at the end of the day, the question is the strategy that we're doing in Afghanistan, does that make us safer from terrorists? And I think there's still a big question mark about that.
General Petraeus, the president keeps telling us, is not going to change the overall American strategy in Afghanistan. But as you point out, rules of engagement and the other means by which we apply that strategy has to all be up for review. Do you feel like you understand, or you have any inkling of what is up for review, what might change in the shift from McChrystal to Petraeus?
Well, part of it's a change in style, not necessarily substance. General Petraeus has a track record of working excellently with the American ambassador in Iraq, Ryan Crocker, and I think they're trying to hope to recreate that magic in Afghanistan. It's Petraeus the sequel. But as of right now, I haven't had the time to do the reporting I need to do to figure out really what General Petraeus is going to do.
In terms of the parallels with Iraq and Afghanistan, obviously in counterinsurgency, it's about asking the military to accomplish objectives that aren't usually the sorts of things we think about as military objectives, like cracking down on corruption in the Afghan government. And substantively, the problem with General Petraeus, General McChrystal and his aides talking smack about non-military people they're supposed to be working with is that it undercuts the whole idea of the strategy. Do Ambassador Holbrooke, Carl Eikenberry, do they bear some responsibility for the lack of a relationship between the civilian side and the military side? Or was that really a one-way street?
I don't think they bear too much responsibility, in that the whole structure is set up where the military has so much power and there's a sort of confused diplomatic side. And I think what one of the impacts this story has in the shakeup is that I think they're really trying to work that out, specifically with Ambassador Holbrooke and Ambassador Eikenberry.
On the confused diplomatic side, though, is that the part of the diplomats, or is that just because there's so little room for them to operate, they're crowded out by the military?
Look, they're crowded. Like, there are more people in the Army band than there are foreign service officers. You can fit all the foreign service officers, they're members of the State Department, on one aircraft carrier. I mean, the structural deficiencies between what the DoD has and the State Department has is huge. So what that means is that you need to streamline the diplomatic command in the same way we've streamlined the military command. General Petraeus is going to be the sort of supreme commander, and you need sort of a viceroy who's also playing that role. It's similar, it's basically an American viceroy who can sort of wield the sort of weight that a diplomat needs to wield to be able to work effectively and be on the same playing field as the military general.
Michael, I think that it's true that people are now talking in more depth about counterinsurgency than they were before your article came out, and because of that, you may very well change the course of the war. But one of the things that you raise is the issue of what the alternatives are. Sure. Obviously, this president is not going to pull troops out suddenly. He's probably not even going to pull all of them out when he pulls them out. We're going to be there at least with some long tail for some very long term to come. Is CT plus, counterterrorism plus, essentially what's been named the Joe Biden option, right, is that a realistic alternative to what we're doing now, and is it being seriously considered?
Is it being seriously considered? I'm sure people are still pushing for it, yeah, but I think eventually that's where we're going to end up with. We're going to end up with a smaller footprint there, and we're going to end up with like fairly active counterterrorism program there. So eventually we're sort of fighting our way to get to a spot that one would think we could get to without fighting our way there. I mean, as Thomas Friedman said, Afghanistan was probably, we'd have been better off if we would left Afghanistan on sort of a slow boil rather than escalating like we did. But now the die is cast. They're committed to the strategy, and hopefully it works out for the best. Though I have obviously a great deal of questions about whether that's going to happen.
Yeah. Do you think that there's anything that U.S. forces can do about corruption in Afghanistan, really? I mean, everybody talks about corruption as being the reason nothing's going to work. Is there anything we can do about it?
No, it's a joke. I mean, when General McChrystal took over, one of the main things they were discussing was whether or not even corruption should be a focus. I mean, trying to stop corruption in Afghanistan is like trying to stop the drug war here. I think we should really choose our battles wisely and not waste our resources. Though when you see numbers like this, what, $3 billion being flown out on from Kabul airport every day. You just got to wonder, like, what's going on. And research has shown, there's a professor at Tufts University who showed that, in fact, if you throw this aid money into these sort of chaotic situations, that actually fuels corruption. It fuels government illegitimacy rather than helping it.
Michael Hastings, you wrote what will probably turn out to be the most important piece of journalism on the war in Afghanistan this year. You may have changed the course of the war. You certainly have brought the nation's attention back to it in a very dramatic way. Congratulations on your success.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Very happy to see you, man. Thanks.
Take care.